Flanked by olive trees and grown on top of chalky limestone soil, Tablas Creek reigns as the oldest winery in Paso Robles, steeped in Rhone tradition. If you're a Rhone wine lover, both red and white, you will love Tablas Creek's wines, produced directly from imported Rhone rootstocks.
Tablas Creek is fundamentally the story of a friendship between two families that goes back into the late 1960s. The two families are my family. My dad is Robert Haas. He was a wine importer for most of his adult career. The other family is the Perrin family from Château de Beaucastel in Châteauneuf-du-Pape. And my dad made his first trip to Châteauneuf in the late 1960s to find a new supplier for his importing company. And was pointed to Jacques Perrin, who was the patriarch of the family there, and convinced Jacques not just to appoint him their American agent, but also to lend him his two sons to travel around the United States to introduce the American market to the wines of the Rhone Valley, which were basically unknown at the time.
Not a bad thing to do.
So, yeah, he did pretty well, I think. And so they made trips around the U.S. All through the 70s and 80s, introducing Americans to Beaucastel, but also to Châteauneuf-du-Pape and the Rhone more generally. And they became friends. And they came back from their California trips talking about how much it reminded them of the Rhone Valley and how surprised they were that they didn't see Rhone varieties planted to any degree in California. And in 85, they decided to do it themselves. They put together a partnership to find the right spot, spent the next 4 years looking, and in 1989 bought this 120-acre former alfalfa farm and cattle ranch that would become Tablas Creek.
And Neil, earlier you were telling me that you've been here since the first sprout went in the ground.
Yeah, sort of as a nosy neighbor at that point, but in the early days before the winery building was here and it was just a piece of land and some grapevines, the Tablas Creek brought the grapes down the road to the neighboring winery where I was the winemaker at that time, and so I processed everything here since the first vintage, which was 94 I believe, and all the way through. I actually became an employee of Tablas Creek when I went to work at Beaucastel for a year in 97 and moved to the property in July of 98, and I've been here ever since.
How'd you get your start in winemaking?
Interesting. I wanted to learn more about it. I'd read a lot and tasted a lot and wanted to get deeper into it, so I decided to do 1 year at a small winery and go harvest. And I was working in the restaurant business and I felt it would really be beneficial. So I did that for Adelaide Cellars when John Munch owned it, which is the neighboring winery. And here I am. That was 1991. What do I like about winemaking? What turns me on about it? It's the whole process more than just the winemaking, from vineyard all the way through. And it's such an all-encompassing process, from the farming to the tractors into the winery and the tasting and flavor profiles, etc., all the way down the line to going out and eating great food and enjoying the wine with groups of people. I mean, it offers me such a varied life, and that's what I enjoy. I enjoy every element of it immensely, which is why I'm still here after my 1 year ran out.
It's been really exciting to see kind of the wine community bring Paso Robles back to life, because it was really a dying ranching town. Its population had declined by half. There was vacancy even right on all the storefronts right around downtown, and I mean, now it's incredibly vibrant. You go down there any evening in the middle of the week, you see hundreds of people out walking around, eating at the different restaurants and visiting the shops that are down there.
It's a beautiful
really cool
town. I think, Ray Bradbury writes about community a little bit, and what he says is that we've lost our sense of community, but the founding fathers of Paso Robles, they built that little square, that park right down there, and it's lovely. It's great to walk around the streets, to enjoy a little people watching. There's great restaurants, world-class wines down there. So I think it's fantastic.
And the modern redevelopment, kind of development of Paso in the 90s was, I think, done very smartly too. They They built the movie theater, which is right downtown on the square, so that gave people a reason to be down there in the evenings. They redid the town hall and the library, which is again right there on the square. So they gave it a couple of anchor points that people could count on there being people there for, and that meant that was where the restaurants chose to open, which meant that was where the shops chose to open.
Sort of reinforced the fact that this is the center of our community.
Yeah.
Right
Sure.
here. And there's a lot of good. I mean, the wine festival happens there for us, and it's like every weekend during summer there's some olive festival or flea markets, whatever it might be. There's always activity down there.
What time of the year is wine festival?
May.
In May.
Yeah, third weekend in May. Paso Robles Wine Festival. It's been going on for 25 years now, I
Something
think.
like it, 25, 26 years.
It's fun. It's a fun chance. Everybody's out in the park, and you spend a day there with 100 other wineries and 4,000 of your closest friends.
My philosophy has come from originally, well, I'm still just an employee, but taking what was wanted
You're not
by...
just an employee, Neil.
Right. What was wanted by the two families, and taking that and running with it with what I saw that to be, which is really in a nutshell is, here Neil, farm this land, make wines that are as close an expression of this estate as you possibly can. So farm it organically, native yeasts, native malolactics, no real new oak to speak of. Just do as little as I can to make those wines be an expression of the soil. So when you taste the Tablas Creek wine, you can taste minerality, but more importantly, every wine will be different than the previous wine, but there will be a thread of similarity that's not from my hand or my cellar team's hand, but from the vineyard. So it's a very simple concept, but not that easy to stick to. There's a lot of outside influences that are tempting, but we've resisted.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were really lucky in the early days to find Neil, because it's not every winemaker who is willing to put their fingerprints in the background and let the place take the forefront. And I think we've really tried to do that in everything that we do. And Neil talked about the farming. I think it comes out also in how and when we pick. We pick through each block selectively. We'll go through multiple times and pick just what's right, leave the rest, come back a couple of weeks later, pick again, come back a couple of weeks later and finish it off. We keep things separate in the cellar all the way through the fermentation process. We do our blending in the spring, often 6 months after harvest, and our goal in putting the blends together is to make what we feel like is the best expression of this place in this year. That doesn't mean we're trying to make the same wine year after year. We're not. We're trying to make the best expression that we can for that year. And being focused on blends as we are gives us a lot of freedom in that we can use more of the things that are really great in the years where there are things that are really great. And it also allows us to kind of dampen the signature of any individual grape and at the same time elevate the signature of the place, which all of the grapes share.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The master sommeliers or wine directors that have been kind of schooled in Beaune or gone to viticulture school over there, or winemakers that I really respect, and vineyard owners, they all talk about what you just described with the wine being indicative of the place, of the vineyard. And you know, when you walked me around this morning, kind of like up the hill, olive trees flanking the vineyards, olive trees, right? Okay. and
well identified.
Yeah, and then tasting the wines is exactly what you expressed. You know, that limestone, that kind of minerality, different grape varietals expressing from the land where they're grown, and I think it's really interesting. And what you talk about Neil, kind of having his thumbprint in the background, I think that's really like what a true vintner does, you know?
Yeah, I mean it's different than a lot of what my peers do, you know, and don't understand why that doesn't bother me, but it doesn't. I mean, I'm fiercely proud of what I've achieved and what we've achieved here, and that's good enough for me. I mean, I think I've been here long enough, people know who I am.
Sure.
If they want to. And I think that's something else that bears mentioning with Tablas is we've got a crew of people that have been here for a long time. I mean, the core of our vineyard crew has been here longer than me. They were here since day one, a couple of them. So, we're talking long-term employees, and that's a good sign. My assistant in the cellar, Chelsea, she started as a greeter at the front door when she was still at university, and she's worked her way through the business up to be right alongside with me making the wines. And I think that's telltale, because she could have gone anywhere.
Sure.
She doesn't need to stay here, but there's a lot of integrity in the company and what they do, which comes down from the guys that own it and founded it.
We have the next parcel to the south of us that we bought 3 years ago now. Not because we really needed more land at that point, but because we knew that eventually we would want a little bit more, and it struck us it was the only chance that we were going to have to get something that made so much sense. And so we're just starting to plant some rootstocks there this year, and the idea is to develop it really slowly, maybe 5 acres a year, maybe even a little slower than that.
We've also got the new varieties coming in that we sent Davis direct cuttings from Boxtel into UC Davis quarantine program. The rest of the 13 of Chateauneuf that we didn't have. So at present we have Terre Noire, Claret, and Picardin in the ground, a half acre of each. And there's more coming, and as they get cleaned up of any viruses they have. So that, to me, is really exciting, that new piece of property will eventually be home to some really unique stuff. I mean,
it's one of the things that makes Beaucastel distinctive, is that they have all 13 of the Chateauneuf varieties in the ground there, and they use them all. And so when we started, we looked at that list and we're like, well, this one is like half of 1% of your vineyard, and this one's a quarter of 1% of your vineyard. We're not going to worry about those to start. We'll worry about the 8 main ones. But we decided a decade ago that we actually wanted to try them all. And because these were all so obscure, they were all field cuttings directly out of the vineyards at Beaucastel. They all had viruses. They all have been in quarantine for a long time. One of them is still in quarantine 10 years later. But just knowing that we'll have grapes to work with, that in many cases there haven't been any new plantings of these anywhere in the world in decades. And it gives us a chance to really feel like we're continuing to push the boundaries of the Rhone movement, which is pretty exciting.
I think we've learned too, through what we've already done, that there are varieties that are not highly regarded there particularly, that do incredibly well here. First one I would say would be Pickpool that comes to mind, which they like it over there, but it's not a super prestigious grape. But here it's glorious. It's a lovely single varietal and is beautiful in our Esprit Blanc.
Yeah, it's happened to us with several grapes. Grenache Blanc.
Picardin, I'm
Cunoise.
super excited about, because I loved that when I was over there. I thought it was a beautiful varietal. So here, who knows?
The half acre that we planted increases the world's population of Picardin by something like 50%.
Which is pretty cool.
Which is fun.
Tell me about your year in Beaucastel. That must have been amazing.
It was really interesting. I moved my whole family there. My wife was horrified, but my kids were, I think, 3 and 7. So they both went to French schools where they spoke no English, of course, and I went to the cellar of Beaucastel where they spoke no English to me. And it was great. I learned quite a lot of stuff. The most important thing for me, I've always maintained, is that I learned the family and what they wanted, what they desired, what they liked, what they don't like, their personalities. Because when I'm over here doing what I do for them and they're over there, it's pretty intense. When they come to visit, it's front and center for me, even though I get along with them very well, and they're super nice people, and they treat me like family. I have to remind myself I don't own the place from time to time, but learning to understand them and what they wanted, that was key. And I learned some stuff about winemaking, obviously, and viticulture as well. Particularly there, it's much more of less of a panic, less of a dramatic scene there for them, I found, which I really liked.
one of the things that we really believe in at Tablas Creek is that we're making wines for people to drink. We're making wines that we want people to be able to find at their local restaurants. You don't have to come out here. We love you to come out here, but you don't have to come out here to find us. And there are wines that are relatively inexpensive. There are wines that are more expensive and more collectible. But I think we're really excited to be a winery that does represent our category, and hopefully moves the category of Rhone wines in California forwards. We've been here for 25 years, and I think we're just scratching the surface. I'm excited for the next 25.